Hi, welcome to my Fanart Buru Stimulation Bait playthrough. Today, we're going to be inciting thirst for the TF2 mercenaries and encouraging it to be particularly more accurate. However, there's a singular restriction here. There are 3 classes who I will not cover in depth, due to the topics mandatory to discussing the shape of their bodies being extremely sensitive topics to myself. These are the Soldier, Jane Doe, the Scout, Jeremy Scout TF2, and the Pyro TF2. I'm gonna give a few seconds of warning to skip through this few seconds ramble, giving the reason why if you think they may be sensitive to yourself as well. Okay, until the picture of the quick fix goes away, I'm discussing awful topics.
Soldier is canonically experiencing poisoning-related psychosis, which his design confirms, and I would have to describe physical effects of something I have seen far too much of extremely deeply in a jesting video. Scout, between his form and actions and a few of his items, and how they aid him, extremely likely has an addiction to stimulants, which is encouraged on him in relation to his job. Same exclusion reason as Soldier, a different way in, though. Pyro is likely developing partial asphyxiation-related psychosis, and is hinted to be some non-standard gender-type person. Same reason as Scout and Soldier, but with their own added extra reason.
Alright, onto the funny video about the sexy men who scream at each other while posturing. Demoman TF2. The comics artists have released official art of Tavish de Groot, or the Demoman, waking up after a bender. He's a merc who you are most prepared to draw fully nude at this point, and yet you choose Jane and you choose the Doctor. Disappointing. Go draw Tavish de Top. Medic TF2. To start off, we actually have an official public art asset for Medic in-game which portrays his physique under his fairly thick clothing. However, this item needs to be taken with a little bit of salt since it was created by a community artist who did not have access to Valve internal physique references for the mercs. It is still a fairly good indication, though, of what he likely looks like chest-bared, since it did receive Valve's official endorsement by being included in the game. To start out absolutely basically, we can see that Medic has been officially endorsed as having fairly sizable pectoral muscles, a large diaphragm, heavily covered fast fat stores, and a large amount of hair across his chest, which can help in figuring out how quickly he grows testosterone-affected hair. The item also indicates a high degree of chafe scarring and mild burn scars around his torso, which are typical of a field physician or ambulatory medic who has worked for a very long time and is highly experienced in his work, which really only tells us that Medic isn't a fraud and can be trusted pretty face value about what he does. For portions of his physique not covered, we now need to start into the physique typicality speculation. To open, we need to understand that Dr. Ludwig's job requires him to both be and appear strong, as well as be attractive, as this puts any injured soldier in the field at a better ease as he performs any work on them or begins to transport them. He will also be very frequently doing work where he has to perform very short period feats of heavy lifting from awkward orientations, and does not get to choose when to rest. To realize the importance of this to his physique, you need to understand how muscles react to work. The type of muscle growth you see most exaggeratedly on bodybuilders is what I will refer to as ballooning, where the muscle is overworked and after rest will grow in size. This is less efficient for developing strength intentionally, though when strength is developed through hardship, or extremely intense work you cannot avoid, is something that will simply happen. As such, any muscle groups that are stressed hard by any person's job will grow in size much more for the same improvement in strength, a fact which forms the basis for how your physique is affected by what you do. Medic's work requires him to use his buttocks and upper legs constantly, along with his back and his deltoids. For lifting anyone positioned awkwardly or performing high-urgency field straightenings of broken bones, he will also exert his pecs, all arm muscles, back muscles, buttocks, most of his core to a particular degree, and many more muscles. Due to the large amount of sudden lifting he has to do while already fatigued, he is likely surviving due to a particularly large diaphragm, which is a muscle that has an inherent upside to ballooning. You can change the amount of air in your lungs by more with less effort, making exhaustion far more manageable. And of course, from the burly beast, we can see that Medic TF2 does in fact have a fairly sizable diaphragm. A typical part for many medicinal workers as well is having extremely strong forearms due to the high amount of grip and ripping force you need while also being incredibly accurate with your hands at all times, so they've likely also ballooned. As such, Dr. Ludwig is the only TF2 mercenary who likely looks exactly like your sexy hypermasculine man reference guy of choice would look, with the exception of extremely powerful forearms and very mild hyperdiaphragmism. He almost definitely possesses more cake than a factory bakery and more seat than an upholstering shop as well. We also have an officially endorsed reference for how much body hair he keeps and how he grooms it. He keeps his face clean-shaven and friendly, though looking tattered like the other men in the field. Obviously to look friendly and attractive, but not too clean for these other men. And his body hair is kept thick to keep it cleanable and comfortable. Heavy TF2. The Heavy starts to build on a very notable opposite side of how ballooning affects the appearance of your muscles from Medic, as he developed his strength through an extremely long time of sustained hardship beginning in his childhood, and you can very much see from official art that his arms are somewhat comedically noodle-like. Pushing aside Valve's comedic artistic representation of his musculature, Mikhail built himself, and he built himself with love and care. Mikhail's physique, as we can see already, is pretty reminiscent of any strongman athlete who is built for a specific sport which has relatively low involvement from the legs. We do not see his fast fat stores, but given his diet and appearing to be fairly packed up in his slow fat stores, we can assume that they likely wouldn't be immediately visible whether or not he stays low, regardless of seeing his torso. We can deduce from his lunchbox items, all being fairly strong and easy to deplete electrolytes, iron, and sugars, except the steak, that he takes extremely meticulous care to his diet to ensure that he will not faint or have a seizure from a particularly long period of exertion. This strongly hints that he is highly accustomed to extremely long periods of sustained mid to high intensity exertion, and therefore likely has fairly high vascularity hidden by his slow fat stores and gloves. Side note, I was supposed to put this in the script and apparently didn't. The vascularity, like high vascularity, causes the dick vein hands. The heavy weapons guy, therefore, likely is most accurately referenced from endurance lifters who have particularly large bellies. Add a note that he likely also has very easily noticed veins on his hands, and at torso rest, his upper belly will extend a very large amount due to severely extreme size of his diaphragm and acclimation to deep waking rest states. You can also see from his appearance that Mikhail is fully shaven, every visible inch of his body. The power of his stubble versus arm hair indicates he's not likely actually naturally bald, but keeps fully shaven any region which could possibly get hair into his guns, since body hairs are, fairly ironically, one of the easiest passive sabotages of a heavy machine. It is likely he shaves every region of his body which he believes may ever contribute a stray hair to go into his gun, including his back and legs, though in a long period of rest from fighting likely becomes fairly typically hairy for a man of his stature and age, which would be rather hairy. In conclusion, Mikhail Weapons Guy likely looks like you've simply shaved a bear and give him the power of diction and the access to human washing, with his shirt removed. Engineer TF2. Del Coniger looks like a Texan. Probably a sightly specimen in the drafting room, honestly, but not much to comment on. He has the most aggressively normal body of all of the mercs who we have not seen the bared chest of. I will note, however, that Del likely keeps his body nearly fully shaven for the same reason as Mikhail. Due to being a blank slate of sorts, though, I think it is not just fine, but correct to juxtapose whatever you want on Buff Engineer Jump Scare onto Del, so go mad. I just realized there's more mercs left than I actually remember. Let me go look up the full list of who's left. Alright, Sniper. Spy TF2. Spy is, very noticeably, a rather slender fellow in comparison to the other mercs. He is, however, not actually that slender. He's more like an average-sized guy in a suit meant to hide his exact body shape, which tends to make you look like a slender rectangle. I kind of don't really care to analyze Spy since it's both sincerely impossible to do in any real informative way, and I also dislike the personality of his character. In my opinion, he's a much better character to think about when he's just the view model in an extremely cool Spy frag vid. Sniper New Zealand. The Sniper is a bit interesting, since he's the only merc obviously not in great shape physically. That is, we can never really know what Pyro's body looks like unless Valve decides to release that info in the next comic update in 2131, but of the characters we can see the bodies of, Mr. Mundy is just not doing great. He lives in a van, and prefers to be driving instead of having his van parked and doing literally anything that might improve his physical shape. He's in a bit of the same boat as Scout in that there's a major portion of speculating on his physique that would be incredibly difficult for me to talk about, but it's not quite as notable as with Scout. Just know that his physique likely changes rapidly, and he appears fairly normal office worker type guy in times of rest. But I mean, Sniper's always working. Sniper is always working. And that's it. Please subscribe to my channel if you